Welcome tonight. Welcome, welcome. It's good to have you here. You know, busy, rain, all those kinds of things. Tonight we're studying the book of Numbers. And the group that's doing the teaching is Adele Arak and Shana Khosravi. And my name is Bruce Bidell. One of the things that I want to really point out is that Numbers is really an exciting book, and we're going to really enjoy it tonight. We're going to try to move pretty quickly. But before we do that, let's just take a minute, okay? And I'd like to open in prayer if we could. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for letting us take time out to learn, to understand, to feel, and try to digest what it is you want us to know about your word. Help us to shut down our busy minds. Help us to really feel that this place is sacred. We're here all together as searchers and lovers of you, and we just want to keep learning more, Lord. Help us to open our hearts up and to listen to what we need to hear. Amen. Well, the first place I'm going to start with is the syllabus. And if you were here last week, I don't know if there are any extra copies over there, but it basically is a 10-week course. And last week we studied Leviticus. The class ends at 8:40 tonight. And we're going to try hard to basically leave time at the end. And the purpose of leaving time is for you to share. We're going to ask. So be thinking about this. We want to know, what has helped? What has sort of touched you inside? What has maybe helped you remember something that you already knew but had grown dim, and now it just got a little brighter for you, something that was important and you had put it off on the back burner and you're glad it's come forward. So we'll try to leave time to do that. The thing about the syllabus, we talked last week, the Torah or the Pentateuch. The Pentateuch, the Old Testament or the Hebrew Scriptures was translated in Greek in about 300 BC, and they called it the Septuagint. But the first 5 books, the Pentateuch, 5 Toros scrolls, first 5 scrolls. And Betty and Jefferson were telling us these first 5 books are the most important books for the Hebrew people back in 1400 BC and even today. And so what are we doing in this class, this series? We're only going to cover 2 of those books. Last week, Leviticus, this week, Numbers. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So to really understand the context of Numbers, we've got to do a little bit of looking at some of the other books of the Torah. And for some of you, this is pretty familiar territory, so just bear with us. But I just want to set up our study tonight. And what we've got is the beginning of Genesis. We're talking about a promise that was given to the Hebrews. And Numbers is about them going for that promise. Well, what is that promise? It's in Genesis. And we look at chapter 15, verses 4 and 6. Abraham, and this is, we're talking 2000 BC. Abraham and God are in a conversation. Abraham is 99 years old, no children. His wife Sarah is way past childbearing age. And Abraham says, you are going to have descendants. Look up at the stars. You're going to have more descendants than you can see of these stars. And Abraham, you know what Abraham does? He believes God. I mean, for us, there would be this huge wall that would go up, and we'd say, wait a second, I am 99, I've never had children, we have had no children. How can you tell me I'm going to have descendants as many as the stars? But Abraham is a man of faith, and his faith takes him up to God, over the wall, to believing this is going to happen. God also promises him, and this is what's key for Numbers, a promised land, a special place. And God describes it in some detail. So we go through Genesis and we get to the end. And now we're in Joseph's era, the last book of Genesis. And Joseph, who has been well received by the pharaohs, he is one of the chief counselors of the pharaoh. Brilliant man, well received. And he is now dying in this last chapter. And he tells his brothers who have now come back and they've been reconciled, he tells them, when I die, you must make sure my descendants, our descendants, the Hebrew people, take my bones out of Egypt up to the promised land. Those are the last words Joseph says. And he dies in the last chapter. 70 Hebrews in Egypt. Now, we go to the next book of the Torah, Exodus. First chapter, fast forward, 400 years, and we see the Hebrews in Egypt. It's pitiful. They've been enslaved for 400 years. They are miserable. They're mistreated by a whole new line of pharaohs that no longer remember who Joseph even was. It's a whole different era. It's 400 years later. And instead of 70 Hebrews in Egypt, do you know how many? There's a multitude. There's been a population explosion. Like the stars, they've exploded. And this has the Pharaoh very concerned. He is worried about these Hebrews, insurrection, whatnot. But he needs them because they're slaves. In any event, Moses comes into the picture, adopted, Hebrew. He's adopted by the Pharaoh's daughter. And for 40 years, he is trained as a prince of the Pharaoh. The best education in the world, most sophisticated knowledge you could have. 40 years old, he kills an overseer because he sees him beating a Hebrew. He's afraid. He runs away. He runs away all the way to the Arabian Peninsula, Median, and he lives there for 40 years. Moses is now 80 years old, and God taps him on the shoulder. And basically, I'm looking for my glasses here. What did they do? Here they are. God, in a theophany, in other words, God comes to him in a physical form, and it's the burning bush. Many of you are familiar with it. But in Exodus 3:7, and I'm just going to read this quickly, you don't have to go to the Bible. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hands of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. The promise again. And God says to him, so now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. He goes back to Egypt, deals with the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh is stubborn, hard-hearted. The plagues come. And finally, the Pharaoh says, I've had enough. And in Exodus 12:33, during the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, up, leave my people, you and the Israelites, go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and get out of here. The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and have the country, for otherwise, they said, we will all die. Their firstborn had just been all killed. Now, what I want to point out here is that the Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people, and they gave them what they asked for.